I never thought the happiest day of my son's life would become the most humiliating day of mine. Standing there in my best suit, gift envelope in hand, watching my only son Tyler marry the woman he loved, I was unprepared for what came next. Amanda, my future daughter-in-law, spotted me near the entrance of the venue and marched over, her white dress trailing behind her. Her face contorted with anger as she pointed at me. "You are not welcome here, Drew. Go away," she shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. Stunned silence fell over the gathering as I stood there, my heart shattering into pieces. Tyler and I had always been close. After his mother left when he was only 4 years old, it was just the two of us against the world. I remember those early mornings making pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, teaching him to ride a bike in the park near our apartment, and staying up late helping with science projects. As a high school history teacher, I didn't make much, but I made sure Tyler never felt like he was missing anything. I put away a little each month for his college fund, worked summer jobs, and somehow managed to help him graduate debt-free. When Tyler introduced me to Amanda 3 years ago, I tried to be welcoming despite my reservations. There was something calculated in the way she spoke, how her smile never quite reached her eyes when we were alone. Still, I reminded myself that it wasn't about me, it was about Tyler's happiness. If she made him happy, then I would make an effort. "Dad, she's the one," Tyler had told me the night he showed me the engagement ring he'd saved up for. It was modest but beautiful, just like our life had been. I hugged him tight, swallowing my concerns. That same night, I made a decision that I kept secret from Tyler. I would pay for their entire wedding. I had been saving for retirement. But what better use of my money than to give my son the perfect start to his marriage? Over the next year, I quietly arranged everything with the wedding planner. Amanda had expensive taste. A 5-star hotel venue, gourmet catering, top-shelf open bar, designer flowers flown in from South America. The costs mounted quickly, draining my savings account, but I never complained. I even took out a small loan against my house to cover the final details. Tyler thought Amanda's parents were covering most expenses, while she thought his friends had pooled together a wedding fund. Neither knew it was coming from my retirement savings. The twist in our story came during the engagement dinner. Amanda's parents, Jack and Susan, seemed uncomfortable when I mentioned some wedding details. "We thought you were handling the rehearsal dinner only," Susan said quietly when Amanda was out of earshot. That's when I realized Amanda had been lying to everyone about who was paying for what. Instead of confronting her, I decided to keep my role secret until after the wedding. I wanted to surprise Tyler with the news that he was starting marriage without any wedding debt. I never imagined how differently things would unfold. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, sunshine streaming through fluffy clouds against a bright blue June sky. I arrived at the hotel 3 hours early to help with any last-minute details, dressed in the new suit I had bought specially for the occasion. In the lobby, I ran into Amanda's bridesmaids, who gave me strange looks when I greeted them warmly. "Is everything okay?" I asked, sensing the tension. "You should probably check with Amanda," one of them said, exchanging glances with the others. I made my way to the bridal suite and knocked gently. When Amanda opened the door, her expression hardened immediately. "What are you doing here so early?" she asked coldly. "I thought I could help with anything that needs doing," I explained, trying to maintain my smile. "Is Tyler around?" "He's with his groomsmen." "Listen, Drew, we have professionals handling everything. You don't need to interfere." She started to close the door, then paused. "And by the way, we rearranged the seating chart. You'll be at table 14, near the back." Table 14 turned out to be behind a large column, partially obscured from the main table. I had originally been told I would be at the family table up front. When I mentioned this to the wedding planner, she looked uncomfortable. "Amanda was very specific about the new arrangements," she whispered apologetically. As guests began to arrive, I noticed something else odd. Amanda's extended family, even distant cousins I'd never met, were being escorted to premium seats, while people I knew to be Tyler's longtime friends were placed at peripheral tables or told there had been mistakes with their invitations. I finally spotted Tyler surrounded by groomsmen. When he saw me, he hurried over with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dad, you're here early," he said, giving me a quick hug. "Is everything okay, son?" Amanda seems a bit tense. Tyler glanced over his shoulder. She's just stressed about everything being perfect. Listen, Dad. Amanda thinks it might be better if you don't give a toast tonight. Her father has prepared something, and we don't want the speeches to run too long. Before I could respond, the wedding coordinator announced it was time to take places for the ceremony. Tyler squeezed my arm and hurried off, leaving me standing alone. I found my way to the ceremony area and took a seat, not in the reserved family section where I expected to be, but in a general guest row near the back. I caught sympathetic glances from some of Tyler's friends who knew how close we had always been. Just before the ceremony was set to begin, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Amanda, still not in her wedding dress, her face flushed with what looked like anger rather than pre-wedding jitters. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" she asked, gesturing toward a side room. I followed her, concerned about what could be so important right before the ceremony. As soon as the door closed behind us, she turned on me. "I know what you're doing," she said, her voice low, but intense. "I'm not sure what you mean," I replied, genuinely confused. "You've been trying to control this whole wedding, talking to my parents, questioning my choices, pretending to be the generous father-in-law while judging everything. Amanda, I've only tried to help." "Help? By making me look bad in front of my family? By constantly reminding everyone that poor Tyler and his teacher dad couldn't possibly afford a nice wedding without help?" Her voice rose with each accusation. "That's not at all what I don't care what you intended. This is my wedding day, and I'm not going to let you ruin it with your pathetic attempts to stay relevant in Tyler's life." Her eyes narrowed as she delivered the final blow. "Tyler doesn't need you hovering around anymore. He has me now." I stood there, stunned into silence, as Amanda continued. "I think it would be better for everyone if you just left." "You can't be serious," I finally managed to say. "I'm Tyler's father, and I'm about to be his wife. His priority. His future." She stepped closer. "You're just the past he's moving on from." The door opened and Tyler entered, looking concerned. "What's going on?" "The ceremony is about to start." Amanda's demeanor changed instantly, tears springing to her eyes as she turned to Tyler. "I was just trying to have a private word with your dad, to thank him for everything, and he started saying the wedding was too extravagant and that I wasn't good enough for you." "What? Dad? Is that true?" Tyler looked at me, doubt clouding his features. "Of course not. That's not what happened at all," I protested. Amanda's tears flowed freely now. "See? He's calling me a liar on our wedding day." More people had gathered at the door, drawn by the commotion. Amanda's voice grew louder, ensuring everyone could hear. "I have tried so hard to include him, Tyler. But he's determined to make this day about him instead of us." "Dad," Tyler said quietly, not meeting my eyes, "maybe you should give us some space today." "You want me to leave your wedding?" I asked incredulously, my voice breaking. Amanda answered before Tyler could. "Yes, you're not welcome here. Go away," she shouted. Her finger pointed at my chest, any pretense of tears now replaced by open hostility. The room fell silent. I looked at my son, waiting for him to defend me, to refute this madness. Instead, he stared at the floor and whispered, "Maybe it's for the best, Dad. Just for today." In that moment, something broke inside me. Without another word, I turned and walked out, past the curious stares and whispered comments, through the lobby and into the bright afternoon sun that now seemed to be mocking me. I got into my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel, and drove away from the wedding I had sacrificed everything to provide. For nearly an hour, I drove aimlessly through town, my mind replaying those horrible moments over and over. My phone buzzed repeatedly, Tyler's friends, a few relatives, but I couldn't bear to speak to anyone. At a red light, I mindlessly checked social media on my phone and felt another stab of pain. Amanda's bridesmaids were already posting photos from the getting ready room with captions about the perfect day beginning. There were pictures of Tyler with his groomsmen, Amanda with her parents, even group shots of guests arriving, but I had been effectively erased, not appearing in a single image. I pulled into the parking lot of Jackson Park, where I used to take Tyler fishing when he was a boy. Sitting on a bench overlooking the pond, I tried to make sense of what had happened. That's when it really hit me, not just the humiliation or the heartbreak, but the financial reality of what was happening. Right now, Amanda was enjoying the venue I had paid for. Guests were drinking the champagne I had purchased, and later they would eat the dinner that had cost me 3 months' salary. My entire retirement savings was funding a celebration I had been banished from. Something shifted in me then. The sadness was still there, but now it was accompanied by a clarity I hadn't felt before. I pulled out my phone and the folder where I kept all the wedding contracts. As the father of the groom and the person named on every payment agreement, I had certain rights. I called the venue manager first. "This is Drew Hamilton. I need to cancel the remaining services for the Tyler Hamilton wedding taking place right now." "Sir?" "The ceremony is already in progress. The reception will be starting in less than an hour." "I understand. But as the person who signed the contract and provided payment, I'm exercising the cancellation clause. Please confirm that you'll suspend services immediately." After a moment of stunned silence, the manager responded professionally. "I'll need to verify your identity when you arrive, but yes, as the contract holder, you have that right. However, the deposits are non-refundable at this point." "I'm not concerned about refunds right now," I said firmly. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Next, I called the catering company, the bartending service, the DJ, and the late-night food truck that was scheduled to arrive at 9. Each call became easier than the last. By the time I reached the florist to cancel the reception centerpiece delivery, I felt a strange sense of calm. I wasn't being vindictive. I was simply withdrawing my financial support from an event where my presence had been deemed unwelcome. The venue manager, Paula, looked distinctly uncomfortable when I arrived at her office through a side entrance. "Mr. Hamilton, are you absolutely certain about this? The ceremony has just concluded, and guests are moving to the cocktail hour now." I showed her my ID and the original contracts with my signature. "I'm certain. I'm not asking for any money back. I just want all services that I've paid for to cease." "This is highly unusual," she said, processing the paperwork. "So is being thrown out of your only child's wedding," I replied quietly. Paula's eyes softened. "I did notice you weren't in the family section earlier. If you don't mind my asking, what happened?" I gave her the briefest version of events. When I finished, she shook her head slightly. "I've coordinated hundreds of weddings, Mr. Hamilton. The amount of drama I've seen would fill a library. But this." She sighed and stamped the final form. "As requested, we'll cease all premium services immediately. The basic venue space remains available as it's past our cancellation window, but all catering, bar service, DJ, and other elements are now canceled." As I turned to leave, Paula added, "For what it's worth, Mr. Hamilton, I think you're handling this with remarkable restraint. Most people in your position wouldn't be this calm." I nodded my thanks and walked out, knowing that within minutes, Amanda's perfect wedding would begin unraveling. Part of me felt terrible for the guests who would be affected, especially Tyler's friends who had done nothing wrong. But a lifetime of putting everyone else first, particularly my son, had led to this moment of being discarded when I was no longer useful. Sometimes, hard lessons were necessary. My phone rang as I sat in the car outside the venue. The caller ID showed Tyler's name. Taking a deep breath, I answered, "Dad? What's going on?" "The bartenders are packing up, and the venue manager says all the food service has been canceled." The panic in his voice made my heart ache, but I kept my tone level. "I was told I'm not welcome at the wedding, Tyler. Since that's the case, I've withdrawn my financial support as well." "What? You were paying for the wedding?" I thought Amanda's parents. "No, son. I covered everything. Every last penny. It was supposed to be my gift to you both." Silence filled the line for a moment before Tyler spoke again, his voice smaller now. "I didn't know. That was the point. It was going to be a surprise. I didn't want you starting your marriage with wedding debt." "But Dad, why didn't you stand up to Amanda when she asked you to leave? Why didn't you tell me then that you were paying for everything?" The question stung because it highlighted my own failure to set boundaries. Would it have made a difference, Tyler? You stood there and let her kick me out. You chose her version of events over mine without question. Before he could respond, I heard Amanda's voice in the background, demanding to know what was happening. Then, she was on the phone. "What did you do?" she hissed. "I canceled the services I paid for." I replied simply, "You can't do that. There are 200 people here expecting dinner and dancing." "Actually, I can. My name is on every contract, Amanda. Check with the venue manager if you don't believe me." "You're ruining everything." Her voice cracked with fury. I always knew you were trying to sabotage us. No, Amanda. I spent my entire retirement savings to give you the wedding of your dreams. All I wanted in return was to be there to see my son happy. You decided I didn't deserve even that much. I ended the call as she began another tirade. Within minutes, my phone was flooded with texts and calls from Tyler, from Amanda's parents, even from some of the wedding guests. I silenced it and drove home, emotionally exhausted but strangely unburdened, knowing that the truth was finally coming to light. The banging on my front door started at 9:30 that evening. I had been sitting in my darkened living room, nursing a glass of the good scotch I'd been saving for a toast I would never make. Through the peephole, I saw Tyler, still in his rumpled wedding suit, with Amanda beside him, her elaborate updo now falling apart, and mascara streaked down her face. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. Yes? How could you do this to us? Amanda shrieked before Tyler could speak. You've humiliated us in front of everyone we know. Amanda, please, Tyler said, placing a hand on her arm which she immediately shook off. Don't you dare defend him. He deliberately sabotaged our wedding day out of spite. I looked at my son. Is that why you think I did this, Tyler? Out of spite? Tyler met my eyes for the first time. I don't know what to think anymore, Dad. You never mentioned you were paying for everything. Then you canceled it all without warning. Without warning? What would you call being thrown out of the wedding in front of everyone? Was that not warning enough that something was seriously wrong? Amanda pushed forward. You're trying to manipulate Tyler against me. You've been doing it from day one, poisoning him against my family, questioning every decision we made about the wedding. That's not true, I said calmly. I've supported every decision, including many I privately disagreed with, because I thought it would make Tyler happy. Like hell you have. You've been undermining me at every turn. Tyler intervened. Can we please talk about this inside? The neighbors are going to hear everything. I stepped aside to let them in, noticing how Amanda stormed past me while taking in every detail of my modest home with a curled lip. In the living room, Tyler tried again. Dad, I understand you were hurt today, but canceling everything went too far. People traveled from across the country for this. I know, and I'm genuinely sorry for the inconvenience to your friends and family. But tell me honestly, Tyler, if you knew I was paying for the wedding, would you have let Amanda kick me out? Tyler looked uncomfortable. Of course not. But what? Would knowing I paid make me more worthy of being at your wedding than not knowing? That's not what I meant. Amanda interrupted. This is exactly what I was talking about. He twists everything, making himself the victim when he's the one who ruined our special day. I turned to her. Amanda, why did you tell me to leave in the first place? Because you were criticizing everything. Telling my mother the flowers were too extravagant, questioning the menu choices with the catering staff. I never spoke to your mother about flowers. And my only conversation with the caterer was confirming my son's shellfish allergy. Amanda faltered momentarily before regaining her composure. Well, you made my bridesmaids uncomfortable, hovering around and interrogating them. I said hello to them in the lobby. That was the extent of our interaction. Tyler looked between us, confusion evident on his face. Amanda, is that true? You told me Dad was interfering with the bridesmaids' preparations. He was. Maybe not directly, but he was creating tension just by being there too early, watching everything. She turned back to me. And don't pretend you weren't trying to make me look bad by secretly paying for everything. You were setting up this whole scenario to swoop in as the hero while making my parents look like they weren't contributing enough. I shook my head, realizing the depth of her delusions. Amanda, I kept my contribution secret because I wanted it to be a gift without strings. I never intended for anyone to know until after the wedding. Convenient excuse? You're just backpedaling now that your plan failed. I walked to my desk and returned with a folder. Tyler, I'd like you to look at something. Inside were copies of all the wedding contracts, bank transfers, and loan documents, along with a card I had written for their wedding day. The card explained my gift and expressed my joy at welcoming Amanda to our family. The date on the envelope showed I had written it 3 months earlier. As Tyler flipped through the paperwork, his expression grew increasingly troubled. Dad, this is everything. The venue, catering, flowers, photography, even Amanda's dress alterations. He looked up, devastated. You emptied your retirement account for this, and took out a home equity loan, I added quietly. It was worth it to me, Tyler. You're my only son. Amanda snatched the folder from Tyler's hands. This proves nothing except that you were interfering in our wedding plans behind my back, making financial decisions without consulting me. The wedding planner consulted you on every detail, Amanda. I just paid the bills. Because you wanted to control everything, she insisted. Tyler stood up suddenly. Amanda, stop. Just stop for a minute. None of this explains why you felt you needed to kick my father out of our wedding. Even if you genuinely believed he was overstepping, that's an extreme reaction. I told you what happened. He insulted me right before the ceremony. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway. That's not what happened at all. We all turned to see Jenna, Amanda's chief bridesmaid, standing in the open doorway with several other wedding guests behind her. The door was open, Jenna explained, stepping into the room. And I think it's time someone told the truth. Amanda's face went pale. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be my friend. I am your friend, Amanda. That's why I can't watch you destroy your marriage on day one with these lies. Jenna turned to Tyler. I overheard the entire conversation between Amanda and your dad before the ceremony. He never insulted her. She ambushed him. You're lying, Amanda shrieked. Another person stepped forward, Bill, Tyler's best man since high school. Tyler, there's more you need to know. I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but after what happened today, he took a deep breath. That guy, Amanda, introduced as her cousin, Mark from Seattle, he's not her cousin. He's a guy she dated before you, and they've been meeting up whenever you're out of town for work. The room went completely still. Tyler stared at Bill in shock. What are you saying? I'm saying Amanda's been cheating on you. Lisa saw them together at the Westlake Hotel 2 months ago, when you were at that conference in Chicago. When she confronted Amanda, Amanda swore her to secrecy by claiming it was an innocent catch-up between old friends. But the way they were acting was definitely not friendly. Lisa, another friend from Tyler's college days, nodded confirmation from behind Bill. Amanda's face contorted with rage. You're all conspiring against me. Tyler, are you going to believe these lies from people who've always been jealous of us? Tyler turned to her slowly. Is it true about Mark? Of course not. He's my cousin. Then you won't mind if I call your mother right now to confirm that? Tyler pulled out his phone. Because it's strange that I've never heard of cousin Mark until he showed up 3 days ago for the wedding. Amanda lunged for the phone. Give me that. You don't need to bother my mother with this nonsense. As they struggled briefly over the phone, more wedding guests filed into my now crowded living room. Among them were Jack and Susan, Amanda's parents. We don't need to be called, Jack said grimly. We're already here. Amanda froze. Dad? Mom? What are you doing here? Susan stepped forward, her expression pained. Amanda, we came to apologize to Drew for what happened today. And, she hesitated, looking at her husband, and to finally stop enabling your behavior, Jack finished firmly. Tyler deserves to know the truth about the woman he married today. What truth? Tyler asked, looking between them. Susan spoke softly. Mark isn't her cousin. We don't even have family in Seattle. And this isn't the first time Amanda has. She trailed off, unable to continue. Jack put his arm around his wife. Amanda has a pattern of manipulating situations and people. We've tried to get her help over the years, but she always refuses. We hoped that meeting someone as grounded as you would be good for her. But instead, I think she saw me as someone she could control, Tyler said quietly, the realization dawning on his face. Amanda's demeanor suddenly changed completely. Tears filled her eyes as she reached for Tyler's hand. Baby, they're all against us. Can't you see? They've always been jealous of our happiness, trying to tear us apart. But we don't need any of them. We have each other. Tyler gently removed his hand from hers. Stop it, Amanda. Just stop. I can see exactly what you're doing now. What I'm doing? I'm not doing anything except trying to defend our marriage from people who want to destroy it on the very first day. She whirled to face me. This is all your fault. You couldn't stand to see Tyler happy with someone else, someone who would become his primary relationship, instead of you. I remained silent, realizing nothing I could say would make a difference at this point. The truth was unfolding without my help. Jenna spoke up again. Amanda, it's over. Everyone knows. Half the wedding guests heard you yelling at Drew for no reason. Then you tried to blame your own bad behavior on him. Now we find out you've been cheating on Tyler? There's no coming back from this. Shut up! Amanda screamed. Her composed facade completely shattered now. She turned to Tyler, grabbing his arm. You're my husband now. You took vows today. You have to stand by me. Tyler gently but firmly removed her hands. The marriage isn't legal yet, Amanda. We haven't signed the certificate. And after what I've learned tonight, we never will. Amanda's face transformed into something almost unrecognizable with rage. She looked around the room wildly, then pointed at me. Fine, but I'm suing him for the emotional distress and public humiliation he caused by canceling our reception. I have witnesses who saw how devastated I was. I couldn't help it, I laughed. A short, sad laugh at the absurdity of her threat. What's so funny, old man? She snarled. Amanda, I said calmly. Every contract clearly states that as the paying party, I have the right to cancel services at any time. Yes, I forfeit the deposits, which I've already acknowledged, but everything was in my name, with my money. You have no legal standing whatsoever. Jack stepped forward. And, Amanda, if you pursue any legal action, your mother and I will testify to Drew's character and your history of similar behaviors. I don't think that's a road you want to go down. Amanda looked around the room, suddenly realizing she was completely cornered. In a final desperate move, she turned to Tyler, tears streaming down her face. Tyler, please. I love you. I made a mistake. We can work through this. Tyler shook his head sadly. No, Amanda. Too many lies. Too much manipulation. It's over. With a scream of frustration, Amanda stormed out, pushing past the gathered guests. The sound of tires squealing marked her departure from more than just my driveway. An awkward silence filled the room until Susan spoke. Drew, I am so sorry. We should have said something sooner about our concerns. You tried to. At the engagement dinner, I reminded her gently. I just didn't listen carefully enough. The tension in the room gradually dissipated as people began talking among themselves. The shared experience of the disastrous wedding, creating an unusual bond. Someone ordered pizzas. Someone else found my collection of board games. Somehow, my humble living room became the impromptu reception venue that the five-star hotel was supposed to be. As I watched Tyler surrounded by his true friends, I felt a profound sense of gratitude amidst the chaos. The day had been painful beyond measure, but perhaps it had saved my son from years of manipulation and unhappiness. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is allow the hard lessons to unfold, even when every instinct screams to prevent the pain. The next few days were a blur of activity. Tyler moved back into his old room temporarily, both of us needing the comfort of familiar routines as we processed what had happened. Amanda made several attempts to contact him, alternating between tearful pleas and vicious threats, but Tyler remained resolute in his decision to annul the marriage. The fallout wasn't easy for him. Despite the overwhelming evidence of Amanda's manipulation and infidelity, Tyler struggled with feelings of failure and embarrassment. I keep thinking about all the red flags I ignored, he admitted one evening as we sat on the back porch. The way she gradually isolated me from my friends, always having some reason why we couldn't attend their events. How she'd twist my words during arguments, until I found myself apologizing for things I never said or did. Even the way she talked about you when you weren't around. What did she say about me? I asked, curious despite myself. Tyler looked embarrassed. That you were clingy and couldn't let go. That your interest in our wedding plans was weird and inappropriate. I'm so ashamed that I let her plant those thoughts in my head. I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. Don't be too hard on yourself, son. Manipulative people are experts at what they do. They target good-hearted people precisely because you want to see the best in others. But I hurt you, Dad. I chose her lies over your lifetime of honesty. And I forgive you completely, I assured him. The important thing is that you recognized the truth before it was too late. The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the front door. Tyler went to answer it and returned with Jack and Susan, Amanda's parents. Hope we're not intruding, Jack said, looking uncomfortable. We wanted to speak with both of you, if that's all right. I gestured for them to join us on the porch, and Susan took a seat while Jack remained standing, hands clasped behind his back, like a man preparing to deliver difficult news. "We've come with an update and an offer," he began. "First, you should know that Amanda has left town. After failing to convince Tyler to reconsider, she packed up and told us she's moving to California. She asked us for money for a fresh start." Susan dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "We refused. It was one of the hardest things we've ever done as parents, but we had to stop enabling her." "That must have been very difficult," I said, genuinely sympathetic. Whatever Amanda had done, these were still parents suffering the pain of a child's poor choices. Jack nodded. "It was. But what brings us here today is this." He placed an envelope on the table between us. "Drew, we know you spent an enormous amount on the wedding. While we can't cover everything, we'd like to contribute what we can." I stared at the envelope without touching it. "That's not necessary. I made the choice to pay for the wedding freely." "Please," Susan insisted. "If not for yourself, then consider it a fund for Tyler's actual future, whenever that may come. We feel terrible about everything that happened." Tyler spoke up. "Jack, Susan, you don't owe us anything. Amanda's actions aren't your responsibility." Jack's shoulders sagged slightly with relief at these words. "That means more than you know, Tyler. We've spent years blaming ourselves for not getting Amanda the help she needed when she was younger." "What do you mean?" Tyler asked. Susan and Jack exchanged glances before she answered. "Amanda has always had difficulties with the truth and with relationships. In high school, she falsely accused a teacher of inappropriate behavior when he gave her a failing grade. In college, she created elaborate deceptions about her background to impress friends. Each time there were consequences, she would seem to understand and promise to change. But it never lasted." "You tried," I said gently. "Some people just aren't ready to accept help." "That's kind of you to say," Jack replied. "But it doesn't erase our regret about not warning you both more clearly. We saw how she was isolating Tyler, just like she's done in previous relationships, but we kept hoping this time would be different." The four of us talked for nearly 2 hours as night fell, sharing observations and experiences that painted a clearer picture of the woman who had nearly become a permanent part of our families. There was sadness in the conversation, but also a strange relief in finally speaking truths that had long been suppressed. Before they left, I did accept their envelope not for myself, but to put toward whatever financial obligations Tyler might face from the wedding cancellation. Some vendors had been understanding about the extraordinary circumstances, but others were strictly enforcing their contracts. Between the money from Jack and Susan, and what I could still manage, we would be okay. Not as financially secure as before, but okay. The real twist came 3 days later when Tyler returned from clearing out the apartment he had shared with Amanda. He carried a small box which he placed on the kitchen table. "Dad, you need to see this." Inside were documents Amanda had apparently forgotten in her hasty departure: financial statements, loan applications, and credit card bills, in Tyler's name that he had never seen before. "She was opening accounts in my name," Tyler said, his voice hollow with shock. "Credit cards, personal loans, even a second mortgage on the apartment I thought we owned outright." I examined the papers, a cold feeling settling in my stomach. "Tyler, this is identity theft. She forged your signature on these documents." "I know." He sat heavily in a chair. "There's over $70,000 of debt here that I knew nothing about. Designer clothes, jewelry, even payments to that guy Mark. You need to report this to the police," I said firmly. "This isn't just a relationship issue anymore. It's fraud." Tyler nodded slowly. "I already called them. They're sending someone over to take a statement. But Dad," he looked up at me, his expression troubled, "if I hadn't found these now, if the wedding had gone through and we'd stayed married, this debt would have become legally mine too. She could have financially ruined me." The realization hung between us that what had felt like the worst day of our lives might actually have been a narrow escape from something far worse. Sometimes, painful endings were actually merciful beginnings in disguise. As we waited for the police to arrive, I made a decision. "Tyler, I know this isn't the right time to bring up future plans, but I want you to know something. I booked a fishing trip for us at Cedar Lake next month. Just the two of us, like when you were a kid. If you're interested, that is." For the first time since the wedding disaster, Tyler smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I'd like that, Dad. I'd like that a lot." The police officer who took Tyler's statement was thorough and compassionate. She explained that cases like this were unfortunately common and outlined the steps for Tyler to clear his name and credit. It wouldn't be a quick or easy process, but it was possible. Sometimes, that's all you can ask for. When rebuilding from deception, the possibility of a way forward. Summer faded into autumn, and with the changing leaves came a sense of healing for both Tyler and me. The police investigation into Amanda's financial fraud was proceeding slowly but surely. Tyler had managed to get most of the fraudulent accounts closed and was working with a credit counselor to repair the damage to his financial reputation. I had returned to teaching when the new school year began, grateful for the familiar routine and the distraction of fresh faces eager to learn about history. My colleagues had been surprisingly understanding about my depleted retirement account. Several even organized a small fundraiser that touched me deeply. It wasn't enough to replace what I'd spent, but the gesture itself was worth more than money. On a crisp October morning, Tyler and I set out for our long-planned fishing trip to Cedar Lake. The 3-hour drive into the mountains gave us time to talk about everything and nothing, the way we used to before Amanda entered our lives. "I got a job offer yesterday," Tyler announced as we wound through pine-covered hills. "The engineering firm in Portland. It's a good position, with room for growth." "That's fantastic news," I said, genuinely pleased. Tyler had put his career somewhat on hold during the years with Amanda, who had never supported his ambition to work for a larger firm that might require relocation. "When would you start?" "January. It gives me time to tie up loose ends here." He stared out the window at the passing scenery. "Dad, I want you to know that I've been talking to a therapist about everything that happened. It's helping me understand how I let myself be manipulated for so long." "I'm glad to hear that, son. The thing is," he continued, "I've realized I need to make some changes, stand on my own 2 feet again. That's partly why this Portland job appeals to me. It's a fresh start somewhere new." I nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and the bittersweet awareness that comes when your child truly steps into independent adulthood, even if it happens later than expected. "You'll do great there." "There's something else," Tyler said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "The detective working on Amanda's fraud case found something interesting. Apparently, this wasn't her first time." He handed me a folder containing copies of police reports from 2 other states. Amanda, under slightly different names, had been investigated for similar schemes with previous partners. She had always managed to move on before charges were filed. "The detective thinks they have enough evidence this time for a solid case," Tyler explained. "With my documentation and testimony, plus the records they've gathered from the other victims who've come forward, she won't be able to just disappear and start over somewhere else." I reviewed the papers, struck by the pattern of behavior so clearly documented. "I'm sorry you got caught up in this, Tyler, but I'm proud of you for helping make sure it doesn't happen to someone else." He smiled ruefully. "Cold comfort sometimes, but it helps to think some good might come out of this mess." We arrived at the small cabin I had rented by the lake, just as the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the water in shimmering gold. It was a simple place, 2 bedrooms, a basic kitchen, and a stone fireplace, but it felt like luxury after the emotional turbulence of recent months. That evening, after a surprisingly successful day of fishing that yielded 3 good-sized trout for dinner, we sat by the fire with cups of coffee, spiked with a touch of whiskey. "Do you ever wonder about her?" I asked quietly. "About where she is now?" Tyler considered the question. "Less and less. The therapist says, that's a good sign, that I'm processing what happened, rather than staying stuck in it." "I think that's true," I agreed. "What about you, Dad? You lost more than I did in some ways. Your savings, your retirement plan." I shrugged. "Money comes and goes. I'm healthy. I can keep teaching a few more years than I planned. And I didn't lose you, which is what I feared most when she started coming between us." Tyler stared into the fire, his expression thoughtful. "You know what the craziest part is? Despite everything she did, there are still moments when I miss her. Or not her exactly, but the person I thought she was. Is that weird?" "Not at all. You fell in love with the person she pretended to be. That person never existed, but your feelings for that illusion were real." We talked late into the night, about Amanda, about Tyler's hopes for Portland, about my teaching and the possibility of writing that history book I'd always contemplated. It felt like the final phase of a long healing process, not forgetting what had happened, but integrating it into our life stories without letting it define us. The next morning, Tyler received a call from the detective handling Amanda's case. He listened intently for several minutes before thanking her and hanging up. "They found her," he told me, his expression complex. "In San Diego, she was already engaged to another man, a surgeon. They've arrested her on multiple fraud charges." I waited, watching emotions play across my son's face. "I should feel vindicated," he said finally. "But mostly I just feel sad. Sad that someone could live their entire life manipulating others instead of building something real." I clasped his shoulder. "That capacity for empathy, even towards someone who hurt you? That's what makes you nothing like her, Tyler. That's why you're going to be okay." He nodded, then gestured toward the lake, where morning mist was just beginning to lift. "Enough heavy stuff. Let's catch some fish." As we gathered our gear and headed down to the shore, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The wound Amanda had inflicted on that wedding day had been deep, but wounds eventually heal, leaving scars that remind us of our resilience rather than our pain. The final surprise came on our last day at the lake. Tyler received an email from his lawyer with news that stunned us both. Amanda had agreed to a plea deal that included full restitution of the money she had fraudulently obtained in Tyler's name. It wouldn't happen immediately, and it might take years of structured payments, but eventually, Tyler would recover what had been stolen from him. "I never expected to see any of that money," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Sometimes justice finds a way," I replied. "Not always, but sometimes." As we packed up the cabin and prepared to return to the city, I felt a quiet certainty that we had turned a corner. The future stretched before us, not unmarked by what had happened, but no longer overshadowed by it either. And in that moment, that was enough. 1 year later, I stood in the airport terminal, waiting for Tyler's flight from Portland to arrive. He had been thriving in his new position, recently receiving a promotion that validated his decision to make the move. We spoke weekly by phone, but this was his first visit home since Christmas. As passengers streamed through the arrival gate, I spotted him immediately taller than most, with the same confident stride I remembered. But there was something different about him too, a lightness that hadn't been there before. "Dad!" he called, enveloping me in a hug. "You're looking good." "So are you," I replied truthfully. The haunted look that had lingered in his eyes for months after the Amanda disaster was completely gone. As we collected his luggage, I noticed him checking his watch several times. "Are we in a hurry?" I asked. "Not exactly." Tyler seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "Actually, there's someone on a later flight that I was hoping we could come back for. She had a work meeting this morning, so she couldn't take the same flight as me." "She?" I raised an eyebrow. Tyler smiled sheepishly. "I was going to tell you tonight over dinner, but I've been seeing someone. Her name is Jessica. She's a nurse at the hospital near my apartment complex. We met when I had that minor skiing accident in February." I remembered the call about his sprained wrist, but he had never mentioned meeting anyone special. "You've been keeping secrets, son." "Not secrets exactly. I just wanted to be sure before I said anything. After Amanda." He trailed off, not needing to elaborate. "I understand," I assured him. "Of course we can come back for her flight. I'd love to meet her." We spent the next few hours at a nearby restaurant, catching up on everything that had happened since his last visit. Tyler shared stories about his work projects, his new friends in Portland, and gradually, more details about Jessica. "She's nothing like Amanda," he said, then caught himself. "Sorry, I probably shouldn't make comparisons." "It's natural that you would," I replied. "Just don't let the past color your present too much." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "Jessica actually helped me with that. She's been incredibly patient about my trust issues. She's straightforward and honest, sometimes brutally so." He laughed. "She called me out when I was getting paranoid about some innocent situation. Told me I was projecting old patterns onto new circumstances. Sounds like a wise woman." "She is, and completely independent. Has her own career, her own friends, her own life. She doesn't need me for validation or financial support. We're together because we choose to be, not because either of us is trying to get something from the other." The contrast with Amanda couldn't have been more stark, and I felt a weight lifting that I hadn't realized I still carried the fear that Tyler might repeat the same pattern with another manipulative partner. Jessica's flight arrived on schedule, and I watched Tyler's face transform as he spotted her among the deplaning passengers. The joy and warmth in his expression told me everything I needed to know before I even met her. She was a tall woman, with curly brown hair and an open, friendly face. Nothing like Amanda's calculated beauty, but with a natural warmth that immediately put me at ease. "You must be Drew," she said, extending her hand. "Tyler talks about you constantly. Thank you for letting me crash your father-son weekend." "Any friend of Tyler's is welcome," I replied, instantly liking her directness. Over the next few days, I had the pleasure of watching Tyler and Jessica together. The easy rapport between them, the mutual respect, the absence of the walking on eggshells tension that had characterized his relationship with Amanda. They disagreed sometimes, even argued briefly about directions while we were hiking. But there was no manipulation or emotional punishment afterward, just honest communication and resolution. On their final evening before returning to Portland, Tyler asked me to meet them at Franklin Park, a place that had special significance for us because I had taught him to ride a bike there as a child. When I arrived, I found them sitting on a blanket near the pond, a small picnic laid out. "Dad," Tyler said as I joined them, "we wanted to share some news with you in person." Jessica smiled and reached for Tyler's hand. "We're getting married," Tyler announced. "Not right away, we're planning for next summer, but I wanted you to be the first to know." I felt a complex wave of emotions, joy for my son's happiness, but also a reflexive anxiety about the past repeating itself. I must not have hidden it well, because Jessica spoke up. "Drew, I know what happened with Tyler's previous engagement," she said candidly. "He's told me everything. I understand if you have concerns." Her directness was refreshing. "It's not about you, Jessica," I assured her. "From what I've seen, you're wonderful for Tyler. It's just parental worry." "Completely understandable," she nodded. "That's partly why we wanted a longer engagement time to be sure, to plan carefully, to do things right." Tyler added, "And Dad, we're going to have a simple ceremony. Just close friends and family. No extravagance, no drama." I smiled, realizing he was also addressing my unspoken financial concerns. "Whatever you two want is fine with me. I'm just happy to see you happy, son." "There's one more thing," Tyler said, exchanging a glance with Jessica. "We'd like to get married here, in this park, because of what it means to our family history. And," he took a deep breath, "I'd like you to be my best man, Dad." I felt my throat tighten with emotion. I'd be honored. As the sun set over the park, turning the pond to molten gold, I reflected on the long journey that had brought us to this moment. The disaster of Tyler's first wedding day, an event that had seemed like the end of so much, had ultimately been just one chapter in a much longer story. A painful chapter, certainly, but one that had led to growth, to wisdom, and now, to a new beginning filled with genuine promise. The following summer, I stood beside Tyler under a simple flower-covered arch in Franklin Park, watching his face, as Jessica approached in a modest white dress. The gathering was small, perhaps 40 people compared to the 200 at the failed wedding with Amanda. There were no ice sculptures, no designer flowers flown in from exotic locations, no 5-course gourmet meal waiting afterward, just sincere vows, genuine emotion, and a reception at Tyler's favorite local restaurant. When it came time for my toast, I kept it simple. To finding joy after sorrow, to learning from our mistakes, and to recognizing true love when it finally arrives. To Tyler and Jessica. As glasses clinked and the small crowd cheered, Tyler caught my eye across the room and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." I knew he wasn't just thanking me for the toast, but for everything, for standing by him through the darkest period of his life, for not saying "I told you so" when Amanda's true nature was revealed, and for helping him find the strength to trust again when the right person came along. Later, as Tyler and Jessica shared their first dance, Jack and Susan, who had been invited at Tyler's insistence, despite the painful memories, approached me. "You raised an extraordinary son," Susan said quietly. "Not many young men would have the capacity for forgiveness and growth that Tyler has shown." "We all did the best we could," I replied, including them in the sentiment. And look what came of it in the end. As I drove home that night from a wedding where I had been not just welcomed but honored, I reflected on the strange and winding path that life sometimes takes. The painful memory of being told to leave my son's first wedding had been transformed into something else, entirely a moment of necessary intervention that had ultimately led to authentic happiness. Perhaps the most valuable lesson in all of this wasn't about romantic relationships or even parent-child bonds, but about resilience itself, the human capacity to absorb life's harshest blows and still remain open to joy, to trust, to new beginnings. That openness isn't naivety or weakness. It's perhaps the greatest strength we possess. The next morning, I woke to a text message from Tyler, with a photo attached, he and Jessica laughing on the dance floor, caught in a moment of pure joy. The caption read, "Second chances are sometimes better than firsts. Love you, Dad." I smiled, knowing that while we can't control everything that happens to us in life, we can control how we respond, how we rebuild, and how we choose to move forward. And sometimes, if we're fortunate, what initially feels like our greatest defeat becomes the foundation for our most meaningful victory. Have you ever had to stand your ground to protect someone you love, even when it felt impossible? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this story of standing up for what's right resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need this reminder that sometimes the hardest moments lead to the best outcomes. Thank you for listening, and remember that even in our darkest moments, better days are always possible.